Welcome back, episode 5 of the KalantarKast, and we're going off with a bang. I've had a couple really good guests, and I'm extremely happy with my fifth. Olympic silver medalist, and he's just come off a bronze at Tokyo, the silver at Rio, of course, in the quad scull, and actually my PE teacher from back in Year 10. So that's how I managed to reel him in onto the podcast. Mr. Cameron Girdlestrone, thanks so much for your time.
Julia, it's a pleasure to be on your show and on the KalantarKast, and I'm looking forward to this afternoon's session, chatting all things life, sport, rowing, family, even back to the days when I sort of was looking after my star student in Year 10. Hey,
look, I wasn't going to say it, but come on, everyone in the class knew that there was definitely a star student in that class.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also fatherhood as well. 2020 has just keeps on giving gifts, doesn't it? I mean, we're in lockdown and everything, but
it does, mate. Yeah, 2021 has been a big year for myself and my family. So no, it feels like a little bit sort of with the birth of my little son Paddy, and back in making the Aussie team and the Olympic team and coming home with a bronze medal. It almost feels like this sort of this dream, or I'm going to wake up from this dream a little bit, or the bubble's about to burst. So I'm going to ride it for a little bit longer, but always going well from my side of things. So I look forward to giving you a bit of an insight this afternoon.
Likewise, thanks so much. So I guess intuitively the best place to start would be from the start. And it was actually for you with a cricket bat at a Sydney rowing school. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so sort of taking it back to my sports. So sports always been a big part in my life. I went to the King's School. I went there as a primary school, sort of joined there in year 3, and also then carried through to the high school. And sort of summer sport was cricket. I love cricket and sort of dreamt of one day wearing the baggy green. And as I sort of moved through my summer sporting career of cricket, and my winter sport was rugby, and the opportunities I had at Kings I was very grateful for. And probably sort of year 8, I didn't start rowing the first year that you can usually start in some of the Sydney sort of the boys' schools that row. Sort of you can usually start at the end of year 7, which is sort of about that age 13, 14. I didn't start until the next year, and I sort of watched the rowers and the year that they had, and obviously the fun that they were having. And I was getting out too many times in cricket, so and watching from the sideline too much. So I said, like, to my other mates, well, why don't we go join the rowers? So there we were. We went and joined the rowers, and I was end of year 8. The sports master, the cricket master at the time, never spoke to me again for my whole schooling career, that I'd quit cricket, and started in the 5th year 8 quad, and ended up in the sort of the second year 9 quad of my year 9 year, which was great, with the other 2 guys that I joined rowing with at that time, and then moved through my rowing career as my summer sport. And I guess sort of people ask, what did you enjoy about, or the love for rowing? And I think sort of it pretty much sort of stood right out for me, was that just that competitive sort of nature to it, that sort of very goal orientated. And also for myself, I was very drawn to that idea of sort of the more you put in, the more you get out, and the reward for hard work. But I think that sort of team camaraderie of that sort of thing, ultimately, like, I'm biased, but we all love our own sports, but rowing is the ultimate team sport in my mind. Like, you have to put your blade in at the same time every time, in training and in a race, under pressure, under the watchful eye of a coach, with teammates, and the art of the perfect team. Like, that's really enticing to me. And I think I grew to that from a very early age, and then moved through that through school, and was successful in my year 12 year of doing it with sort of 8 of my other best mates, including sort of a couple of the guys from the younger year in year 11 with me. And we still, to this day, I'm still best mates with those guys I've rowed with through school and through my club at Sydney University after school, and at a national level. Sort of rowing, it forms bonds through friendships, not only from a rowing perspective, but in life as well. And all of my bridal party, my wedding, like, they're all people that I rowed with. Like, it's a very close knit sort of bond that you get from rowing. And I think from an early age, as I touched on, like, that's what drew me to the sport and just engulfed me in it.
Lovely. And also, I guess, in the kind of later years, stroke the first 8, winning first 8, going overseas, rowing at Henley as well. I imagine that all those experiences definitely collated into a sport that definitely blossomed in your heart.
Yeah. It's I guess sort of some people sort of say, like, we're not rock stars in this sport, and but we get to see some pretty amazing parts of the world and get to travel, and the opportunities, and sort of the first time sort of I represented Australia was at a junior level. So 2 years after I started rowing, I was at a World Junior Championships in Germany with 3 seniors of my school, another guy from Shore, and this opportunity that I was wearing the green and gold. And I think so when I first started rowing, I was like, wasn't even thinking about sort of the representation side of it. I just wanted to be competitive and prove to myself that I could do it and I could be tough and I could back myself and all those things that you learn from it from an individual perspective. But then what opportunities it can open up as well. And for me, it was that that motivation to represent the country, and but also it's forming sort of working with a rowing club, like joining a rowing club after school and being a part of that sort of social setting, and or then opportunities to study and row as well, sort of in overseas as well, here in our own country. If you wanted to sort of go down that real sort of full-time sort of high performance side of things, there's sort of the centralized system here in our country. So rowing is one of the sports in our country, which we're very lucky that it has so many opportunities if you want to continue that interest and that love for what you do post school. And it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It's got a varying degree within our community of your involvement. And I think sort of for myself, it'll always be a part of me. Sydney University Boat Club is my club, and the role that I play in that sort of club and sort of how I was sort of brought into that club was to sort of watching the role models and the senior athletes. It's very inspiring. It's now for me to sort of be that guidance, be that mentor, and to give back a little bit sort of to really sort of reflect and help the next generation of rowers come through, whatever level that is.
And obviously, from hearing from what you said, I don't want to assume, but it kind of definitely sounds like rowing at the next level after school for you was a no-brainer. It was something that you were definitely looking to do.
Yeah, so like, really good question. So I left school in 2006, and I got into a Bachelor of Education. I originally wanted to do at Sydney University Bachelor of Sports and Exercise Science, and that was out at Cumberland. And I was rowing at Sydney University at on the Lane Cove River, and I was at college at St Paul's. And I guess sort of all the pieces at that time of 2007 when I first left school probably weren't working out. I was sort of getting pulled in different directions and needed to prioritise a little bit. So I transferred to Bachelor of Education on campus at Sydney University, specialising in PDHPE teaching. And I was able to combine that and also sort of prioritise rowing. And I guess sort of I had sort of that little sort of bit of initial success after leaving school. I represented Australia again in 2007 at an under 23 level. And then probably a period sort of as I came back from 2007 and 2008, sort of performances sort of started to, I guess, not to sort of have that sort of general sort of increase that I was having sort of through school, out of school, and performing really well and making teams and being successful, and all parts were going really well. And at the end of 2007, I was invited down to a lightweight Olympic camp back in the day, that when I sort of gave it lightweight rowing a go. So these things were sort of progressively sort of increasing for me. And then probably around sort of 2008, I sort of just drifted away a little bit. As a lightweight, I wasn't holding my weight very well and struggling with that sort of probably mentally. And then I sort of bottled it all up and found myself sort of, I guess, with the attitude of, I'll figure this out on my own. I got a bit distant from the club and wasn't really communicating with the people around me and my support network. And I kind of sort of bottled it up and got a bit sort of quite insular. And inevitably, I didn't make weight in 2008 to race. I didn't compete at sort of states or nationals, and I sort of probably drifted away from the sport a little bit. And upon sort of reflecting on that period, and I'm no closed book athlete, I really sort of am quite sort of brave to talk about this, because it's a one sort of point I always like to reflect. I wasn't brave enough at that time of my life and at my rowing career to ask for help. And I guess sort of if I cast back to that time, it's sort of what I needed to do then was get back to the club, get around my support network, call my coach, call those people that are close to me, friends, loved ones, best mates who really truly know me, to ask for some guidance, because I guess what I was trying to do was do everything on my own. And at this level, the level that I wanted to compete at, it's sort of not possible to do it all on your own. You need that help, you need that guidance, you need that support network that's close to you, those people that you can call on. And that's just not in life. That's just not in rowing. That's in life in general. Behind every great success story as an athlete, there's even bigger success as the support network and the guidance that he has around him. So I really reflect on that time of my career, Gia, because I guess why I'm so passionate about it is because I guess I don't want other athletes to suffer what I did. And it's not that I sort of had got into mental health or it was a really negative part of my life. I guess I just reflecting about it, I can sort of see what I needed to do and be brave enough to do, which was to sort of really connect with my support network, with my club. And sort of I really reflect on that. And sort of moving forward, that was one thing that I really made sure that I had that support network around me. I was brave enough to ask for help, ask for guidance, ask for feedback, because I'm not the person I am today, and 2 Olympic Games. And after having 7 years out of the sport, sort of out of the boat from sort of 2008 sort of to 2013 type thing, I didn't represent from 2007 to 2014. So I spent 7 years off the team. And many people at that time, Julia, sort of was like, oh, he's done. He's not coming back. And I hate the word quit. I never was a quitter, and I never said that I was quitting or retiring. I needed to find that drive again. And I sort of in that same point and theme of sort of being brave enough to ask for help in your support networks. It's a point in time in 2013 was actually when I was at Shore. I was teaching, coaching the boys, mentoring the boys, reflecting on my experiences. And I sort of was 2012, I sort of had a look at myself in the mirror. I was like, mate, you've got to get back to rowing, Cam, and like you've got to give this a go because you want it. And it's just I just had to figure it out and be brave enough to say to myself, you've got to get back. And that point of I like to sort of reflect on is if you can prove it to yourself, you can prove it to anyone that you've got it. And this doesn't have to be sport; it can be any part of life. But as ultimately the biggest sort of challenge or the biggest person that you face is yourself. And your own headspace. And if you can really be brave enough to prove it to yourself, if there is time of adversity or setback or challenge, right now, perfect example. But if you can prove it to yourself that you can do it, you can prove it to anyone else that you can make it. And in 2013, I got back in the boat. I competed at nationals, and then a year later, I was back on the Australian rowing team as a heavyweight. 7 years later, so from going from 70 kilos as a lighty in 2007 to 93 kilos as a heavyweight quad scull in 2014. It's quite a transition, but it's also a very proud part of my life that I like to talk about and reflect on because it's a very defining moment of my career. And I think if you sort of at that time, Julia, someone said to me in 2013, you know what, you're going to go to 2 Olympic Games and you're going to win 2 Olympic medals and you're going to become a father in 2021. You're going to be a proud teacher and a mentor, like all these things. I would have said, look, I just want to prove to myself that I can do something that I set my mind to. And that's probably the real simple message that I guess listeners can take out of this is that to keep it simple and back yourself, but be brave enough to ask for help because it's not a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of strength. 7
years away from the sport on an international level, definitely very long time. In that time, also transitioning from a sweep lightweight rower into a sculling heavyweight rower. And talking about that period where you kind of just went inside, became disconnected. What was it that obviously results lead to that, but what was it that got you out of that? Of course, I imagine being around the Shore Rowing program, coaching a few younger kids and rekindling that love. How did that love kind of come about?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Julia, and it's a bit of an insight into sort of what brought me back to the sport and ultimately to sort of reflect and be really truly honest. It's sort of, I think at the time of, I started working at Shore in 2011. I was coaching footy at the time. I was teaching. I was just getting engulfed in everything sort of as I was as a student. I just was sort of being a master and a teacher. And sort of 2012, I was coaching the first junior eight and, the second junior eight. And we were very competitive against the first junior. And I had a very, very good crew and we were, super competitive, and I really mentored the boys from a side of sort of getting the most out of them, really backing themselves and giving their best effort. Not sort of about it's win or else, but it's like that. What's my role in this part to play? And I think sort of the reflecting of my career as that I had through School of Rowing and my experiences, and then I guess for myself, I started doing a bit more training, and then in 2012, as I sort of touched on, I sort of took myself back to the sheds. And for me, I was working full time. So class starts at 8:20. I had to get down to the sheds to do a decent session at sort of at sort of 5 o'clock on the water to do sort of get out there and get back to school and get organised to start my day. And I remember the alarm going off and sort of partway through, I think maybe it might have even been a winter of 2012, and the alarm went off at sort of 4:30 or whatever to get down to the sheds. And I was living at the boarding house at the time, and I hadn't had an alarm go off at that time for years, like not to go rowing anyway, maybe to get up to do something or whatever, but not to get back in the boat. So I sort of take myself down the sheds. No one's down there, like had to open it up, and we're down at, we were rowing, Sydney University at that time was rowing out of Tarban Creek, which is just across from where the Joey shed is, just because our shed was getting renovated and rebuilt over at Lindley Point. Anyway, so I'm down there. It's pitch black. No one's around because the later guys, the uni guys, were rowing later. Now I take my boat off the rack, and no coach, no one. Take myself down, row out of Tarban Creek. I'm sitting in the middle of the Parramatta River. It's sort of 5:30 in the morning, pitch black darkness. I haven't been out on the water for years, and I'm asking myself, what are you doing? You haven't been here. You're unfit. You don't know really what's probably like what's bow side or stroke side. You've been out of the sport for so long. But I had a very defining moment in my career right there and then, sitting out there, probably wondering what the hell's circling me underneath me. The guy in the grey suit sort of thing of the Parramatta River, river cats coming by, everything. But the deciding moment I had was, do I continue rowing and make this a reasonable session, or do I just go in? No one's going to know. Like no one's there. No one's going to see me do a 20-minute session or a 45-minute or an hour session. Like, but it'll be me that knows. It'll be me that'll know, and I'll have to live with that decision. And for me, I made the decision to continue and make it into a worthy, sort of worthwhile decision. And that's where we talk about taking responsibility and being accountable for your own actions. And I had to take that responsibility into my hands. No coach was there in a tinny saying, you can do it, like, let's go, let's do this. It comes back to that being brave and being bold and backing yourself. I had to back myself to make the right decision. And ultimately, that one session, Julia, turned into 2 months. My fitness came back, my strength came back, the boat started to move a bit quicker, and I sort of found that reconnection. I found that love of the sport and what I like about it. And it's that being out there in a single with the run of the boat, with that sort of sensation that you're just sort of that effortless rowing, then going faster, being fitter, the numbers are coming a little bit easier. The wake ups in the morning are becoming sort of more routine. And then sort of 2013, I competed. I made the B final at Nationals. Like I didn't make the A final, but I used that 2013 as a bit of a sounding board and a platform to make the team in 2014. So I guess to come back to your question of sort of what did I use as sort of that motivation, or what got me back to the sport, I reckon number one, it was sort of mentoring and reflecting on my own experiences as a teacher and coaching the junior aid, and sort of that real sort of hard look at myself in the mirror. And number two, it was that just being brave enough to get back in there and believing in myself. That I know sort of for some people, they might be like, I couldn't do that. But when you want it so much and you want something in your life, you will find a way to get it. And it doesn't come easy. That didn't come easy for me. Like no one was helping me. Like no one was down there, no coach, as I said, no one woke me up, like no one's ringing me. I had to do it on my own and take responsibility. And that's the sort of lessons I've learned my whole life, but that was a very defining one for me.
Powerful. And when you also compare that, I guess, from earlier in the conversation, becoming very process driven, loving the sport and not necessarily doing it. I mean, everyone likes a medal around their neck, but doing it because you genuinely love the sport. And especially in a sport like rowing, when I know personally, when you're on the river, you're doing 16 Ks in the morning. It's just same stroke over and over again. What was it for you that made you just fall in love with the process? How did you fall in love with the monotonous routine of every day doing the exact same thing?
Yeah, and again, another sort of just great question around sort of the passion and the love for rowing and sort of what gets me out of bed every morning. And I think sort of with our sport, the uniqueness of sort of once you're in a crew, forming that camaraderie, being there for others, being that ultimate team member and that team player and sort of being there for your crewmates, and that absolute trust in that process as a crew. But I guess if you sort of bring it back to on an individual level, in our sport, we spend a lot of time in the single scull or with your pair partner from a sweet side in the small boat. So for me, it was the single scull. And I guess when I came back to rowing the single scull, I could do it on my own. I could do it with work hours. I wasn't relying on somebody else, or I didn't feel like I was impacting somebody else's life, dragging them down to the shed at 5:10 in the morning. And so that's what probably I went back sort of in the single scull, and then I probably just grew my sculling sort of career sort of from that side, even though I had representation early on as a sweeper. But I guess from the process and the daily grind that they sort of people like to call it of rowing, I guess the big thing for me, which was a big motivator, is the reward of the little processes along the way that sort of make up that big process of a season, or a technique, or your race profile, or how you move in the boat. I guess it was the little things for me, and that sort of quite simply might have been the how well I was taking the catch for a sort of a block of sessions, and making that how what that did to improve the efficiency of the boat, which ultimately then led to me going faster over racing, and then in training, if I focused on that and I was going faster, I would sit in front of other people, or I'd be beating other people. So I guess that motivation for those little steps and those little wins along the way was probably that sort of driver of the process. And I think for me, I've always loved training. I know that sounds like, he's like, are you mad? Like, why don't we just race all the time? That's a lot easier. But I think that inner sort of strength of mine is that I love that training process, and that sticking to that sort of meticulous sort of, when it's down on paper, working with a coach, ticking, sort of really getting the most out of every session that you can. Yeah, it's not going to be like it's this journey that I've been on, or this experience that I've had of rowing. I'm not sort of going to say, hey, and be like, I've loved every single session, I can remember them all, they're all the best, like I PB'd and everything. It's not like that. But it's as an older and more mature athlete, reflecting and having the opportunities when I first came into the senior program, and working with sort of the other Olympians in my experiences, and them teaching me and guiding me that way to sort of get the most out of every session, seeing it as an opportunity, that that's one session. If you can't do any other sessions and this is the last session, how are you going to maximize this session? And that's that sort of the little bits of the little pieces of that process that ultimately make up the big process, which is your executing of a race. And I think that sort of message can still be connected in any parts of our life, business included. Like those, you're in a team, or you're in an individual sort of your own business. It's what are those little steps that you can take control of on a daily sort of routine that ultimately guide you to that end goal, or that end process that you want, or that sort of consistency that you're looking for. And I think consistency is key in rowing. And that's a point that I've sort of, my coach has reflected on it. You don't have to be winning every single day. We'd love to be able to win everything every single day, be in front all the time. But I think it's key to be consistent with yourself and where you're going with that process. And there might be times where it's going great. There might be times where it's not going great, sort of. But if you're consistent with your application, you're consistent with your approach, you're consistent with your routine, your process, that's what's going to pave your way to success.
You're making me want to run through a brick wall.
Oh, well, that's go. Yeah. Oh, we've got it on camera, mate. But I think sort of like for me, it's sort of, as I reflect, I'm no closed book athlete, and I can sort of help and share sort of, if the listeners tuning in, that sort of, if it can, they take 1% or they take one message out of this, if it's just keep it simple, or if it's I've got consistency, you're brave enough and bold enough to ask for help, and it's a sign of strength. If it's 1%, then I feel like I've done my part to giving back, because I haven't got to where I've got without help and without guidance, without support, without bouncing ideas off me, other people. So that's why I'm, I guess, so passionate about it, Gio.
And it rubs off. Just that going on that little rant there, it's just gold. And when I say it makes you want to run through a brick wall, I don't joke about that. But going back a little bit, initially you were a sweep athlete, now a sculler. Of course, rode in the quads. Just quickly, is there a boat for you that you prefer rowing overall?
Look, the quad is a great boat. Like, it's sort of the hum when you get it right in a quad, and the free speed, and the sort of just that when you're at sort of, I know it sounds a bit of rowing jargon, that sort of when you're at one with the boat and you're just in tune, in rhythm, and it just feels like you're effortless rowing. The quad is a sweet boat, and you realize how quick you're actually going, and the amount of minimal effort that you're putting in to go fast. Like that is the ultimate. I haven't rode the 8 for a while, but the 8 again is a great boat. But obviously the quad's at the heart. But I do enjoy. I'm not going to lie. I do enjoy getting out on the Nepean in the single, going up the gorge, being by yourself. The water's flat, the clear blue skies. Like there's no one around. It's just you and the boat. I know that sounds like, are you mad, mate? But like there's nothing better than that.
Mm. Yeah, I can definitely agree. For me, my happy place is actually like 12K upriver. Like that's for
Yeah.
me. I've been fortunate enough to travel a lot too, but when I'm up there by myself, that's where you really feel alive. So,
Yeah.
and then 2014 comes around and you finally make it back into the team and you're racing in Penrith as well. So then it's the road, I guess. You start getting into the boat again, representing Australia, and then it's road to 2016, I guess, right?
Yeah, so in 2014, I made they had the World Cup one in Sydney, and I rode the double with Sasha Belanoga, which ultimately 2 years later we were on the start line of Rio together, and he was in the 2 seat, I was in the 3 seat, but we're best mates. Like he was in my bridal party at my wedding in 2018. He came down from Queensland and rode at Sydney Union. We hit it off straight away as a sort of a double combination, and we had a great sort of, it was an honour and a privilege to race with him at sort of that World Cup one and wear the green and gold with him, and something that we will talk about forever. Then rode the quad at that World Cup, and then ultimately in that year, sort of in 2014, rode the quad with Chris Morgan, which was a great honour. He was a bronze medalist from the quad in 2012, world champion from 2011. So a very experienced rower in Chris, and a great sort of mentor to row with. Coached by Tim McLaren, and that was my first international world championship cruise, as you touched on, since 2007. And so I learned a lot that year, and I think the biggest thing that I learned was probably number one, ultimately was how to be a senior athlete, how to train and row and execute a race like a senior athlete. Because I guess I learned a lot that year from Tim McLaren and from the guys I rode with, and we were a big development crew. Like we really had to sort of open ourselves up and be brave enough to sort of expose ourselves to more Ks, learning how to sort of row the boat better, communication as a crew, all those things that make up a successful world-class winning crew at a world stage. We needed development and time in those areas. 3 of us was the first time representing Australia at a senior level in a quad scull. Morgo had done it before. So we were in the C final at the World Championships in 2014. So a performance and a result that I wanted more from. And the big thing that I learned from going to that World Championships, Julia, was just I was caught watching and fascinated with all the medal winning crews and just how they operated as a world class medal winning crew. The way that they carried themselves on the water, the way they carried themselves off the water, how they communicated, how they worked with each other, and even so Sash and Jimmy in the double that year, Jimmy and McRae, they won the bronze, and they were very sort of tight-knit, how they raced, how they trained, how they prepared. And I reflected after that World Championships in 2014, I was like, I want to be that. Like, I need to take things into my own hands. I need to take responsibility here, because ultimately in 2015, I want that. I want to be a medal-winning crew. I want to be in a crew that's tight-knit, has bonds of unity, has respect, has that communication, has that art of that ultimate crew. I wanted that so badly. And so came back to training in Sydney. I was working full time as well as a teacher and doing the boarding stuff in Barrie. And I moved my training. I sort of moved my boat around to Lane Cove and was still with my squad and with my coach. But I just took ownership of a few little things that I knew that were going to have to help me for my goal in 2015 to make the crew again and be successful, because I did not want to come 15th again in the world. And again, that touches on that accountability, responsibility, being brave enough to back yourself in what you think is right for you. And I worked with my coach. I didn't do it all on my own, or I didn't do it against the grain or anything like that. I really did it in conjunction with him, but I had to find a way to help myself. And ultimately, fast forward into 2015 at World Championships, I was in a silver medal winning boat. So I went from 15th to 2nd in the world, and qualified the boat for Rio. And then sort of fast forward to the 2016, a silver at my first Olympic Games with Carson Fosseling and Jimmy McRae, who were guys that had won a medal in the boat in London. And then Sasha as well. So I guess in that period of 15 to 16, what did I do better, or what did I improve, or what made me successful? I think sort of when I was in the quad with those guys in 2015, Carson Fosterling and David Crawshay were in the boat with myself and Dave Watts, two young guys. And David Crawshay, Olympic gold medalist from the double in Beijing, Carson Fosterling, bronze medalist from 2012 Olympics in the quad. I'm rowing in a boat with guys that have done what I want to do, and that's to win an Olympic gold medal. Or David had done that in 2008. And that opportunity, it's just like, number one, I want to knock these guys off every session I can. And if I can beat them, I'm going to absolutely beat them. But just they really taught me and exposed me to that. Okay, I'm in a world championship crew here. Okay, well, how do we train like a world championship crew that's going to go there and be successful? And it's all about the 1%ers, how to recover, how we take every opportunity in training. And I guess we all played a role in respecting what each individual brought to the crew, the way we communicated, the way that we reflected, the way that we listened to each other. We trained hard and we did the program and we did it well, but it's probably what I learned from those guys was the importance of the things outside the boat, which is how our interactions as four individuals and how do we know each other? Because ultimately when we sit on that start line, we need to have complete trust in our process and know that the guy sitting in front of you and behind you has that same mindset and is going to do his job, which is for the boat and ultimately to produce for our rhythm and produce for our process. Because what else the boat doesn't know if it's the Olympic final, the World Championship final, it's on the Parramatta River, wherever it is, it's just the four heads in the boat. And if you can really hone in on those parts of the crew, and even in a team, it could be a business team, if you can really sort of work and understand each other and what each person brings to your team and value that and respect that, and what leadership qualities they might not want to be aspired to be the captain, but you've got to understand what role they play in your team because they're key. They'll have something that you don't have and you've got to value that. And I think that's what I learned from the senior guys like David, like Carsten, like James that I learned. So that's probably the big thing I learned from my first Olympic Games was how important crew harmony is and how important interaction with your crewmates as human beings is.
Great. And just to go back a little bit, you talked, of course, about being in the C final and making it to second in the world. When it comes to essentially being a sponge, absorbing all the knowledge you can, having Carsten and McRae in the same crew as you, two people that have done a lot of what you want to do, or even when it comes to post-race, how would you put yourself in a position to maximize your learning from each session, each regatta, and so forth?
Yeah, so I guess sort of my approach sort of and my role in the boat was in the sort of 2016 crew. I was in 3-seat. James stroked it, Carson sat in bow, Sash sat in 2. And I guess for me, it was really what is my role? What am I going to hold myself accountable for that I've said that I need to do to make the boat go well? And I had to sort of support Jimmy in the length that he was rowing, keep it smooth around the finish and stay relaxed. And if I knew that I was doing those things well and executing those roles and those things that I said to the other guys that I wanted to focus on individually, that gave me really good confidence that the boat was going well and the boat was producing good times because of the role that I was playing. So that gave me real good confidence. But I guess to touch on that point that you said about how did you debrief, how did you learn from those guys, I guess it was being a really good listener, Julia, and letting them share their experiences, let them sort of talk to me, not me sort of telling them, oh, well, I'm better than you, or like it comes back to that accepting everyone's value and role in the team. And for me, I'd never been to the Olympics before. They had been to the Olympics. So my role in that is to be an absolute really, really good listener, but also be able to communicate with them as well. We were really tight. Like we are 4 very, very good mates, like absolutely like close mates. And that probably aided in our level of how we communicated and how we spoke to each other and how we listened to each other. And that even in this crew, like my crew this year in 2021, like we are very tight, like we're very close. We had really good trust. We had really good, clear communication, really good listening skills, and we valued each other's role in the crew and what they brought to the crew. And that was taught to me from Carsten and Jimmy. And for my role in this boat is, I guess I brought a little bit of that sort of, this is how I was sort of exposed to sort of how we can be successful, and just naturally and organically sort of, we worked it out this year, and we really formed that bond from a very early sort of stage of coming together. Because this year, the 2021 crew, we've only been together for 5 months. Like we've never raced internationally. We our first race internationally together, our first race internationally was the heat. So I guess to come back to the question that you sort of were touching on, reflecting on it, probably just ultimately just being able to really listen to the experience that Jimmy and Carsten were sharing with us.
Wow. And I think from what I've heard as well, when it came to Rio as well, you only had 3 months as a crew together for that one as well.
Yeah. So we only, the crew changed 50% from 2015 to 2016. So myself and Carsten stayed in the boat, and Jimmy and Sash came into the boat. So again, we were up against crews that the Germans in 2016 were unchanged. They were the current world and Olympic champions. We'd beaten them 5 out of the 6 times in that season. The Brits were unchanged. The Estonians were unchanged. The Swiss were pretty much unchanged. So we're in a field where, like that, everyone's done the training, everyone's done the ergs, Julia, everyone's lifted the weights, everyone's done the hard work. It's that bond, it's that unity, it's that trust in a crew. It's the process that on the day when that crew and those 4 guys or those 8 guys or 2, or even on your own in a single, when you sit on that start line, you have a clear mind, you have a clear process, and you're almost that idea of you're getting out of your own way type thing. Is that like you're not worried, you're not sort of, what if this happens, or what does that person think, or you're giving yourself every clear opportunity to produce your best. And that's what sort of touched on that point, get out of your own way.
Wow. That was powerful. And coming up to the start line of any international race, I mean, I'm thinking, of course, going chronologically Rio, but any race at an Olympic level, what's going through your head, or what are you thinking about it? Sitting there at half slide or 3/4 slide, or what's the thoughts?
Yeah, well, how about we let's go with Tokyo because it's the most recent one, and probably everyone sort of can reflect off. There's sort of listeners in that sort of watched it in Tokyo. Sort of we had a heat, and then it's direct through the final. So in our heat, hadn't raced for internationally for 2 years. New crew. I'd never raced internationally with Lukey. I'd never raced internationally with Jack. I'd raced before in the quad in 2019 with Caleb at a World Cup, and we won a silver medal. But as a combination, we had never raced together, and none of us had raced any international crews for 2 years since 2019. The other competitors had been racing all season, so we had to really address that big unknown in the big unknown. How fast are we? We knew this season we were pretty quick, and we were high up on the prognostics here and with the team, but ultimately you can't replicate an Olympic heat in training against the other competitors, and that's side by side racing. But I guess what we knew that we was going to be our strength was our trust, our processes, and the way that we wanted to row the boat, and the job that everyone in the crew knew that they had to do, and the trust that we had in each other. And that's not written in the program. You're not going to get a program that teaches you, here's the session on trust, here's the session on how to build friendships or how to build communication. That's got to happen organically within the 4 to take responsibility, and that's got to come from a business team or a leader or someone in the team. You don't get a manuscript on that sort of stuff, and that's what I guess makes champion teams and champion crews, right? Is that ability to work together for a common goal, and all the different intricacies and the pieces, the puzzles that come together, because everyone trains hard, everyone does the work. It's on the day. So for us, cast you to that Olympic final. And on the course at the Sea Forest Waterway in Tokyo, like it was used as a flight path for the jumbo jets coming over to go to Narita Airport. The drone is like the size of a small helicopter, so that's buzzing above your head. The camera boats, there's everything going around. There's cameramen snapping cameras, so there's a lot of distractions. There's a lot of white noise as you're sitting there on the start line, and people are like, what's going through your head? And really, like it's what's going through my head is just get that first stroke right. Don't tear the water. Don't try and do something that you never have done before. Just do exactly what you've done in training and just get the first stroke right, because I can't worry about what the last stroke or the last 250 is going to be in the first part. I just need to get the first part right and keeping it simple. And so that was a real key theme in our boat, was let's keep it simple. And we had this call in our crew, which was our anchor. And I guess to describe sort of what we spoke about, our anchor was when you're in a world, or you sort of, for us, let's use rowing, we're sitting on the start line and all these things are pushing and pulling and we're getting distracted by things, and our mind sort of feels like it's in a bit of a storm, and we're getting lifted into this eye of this storm, right? What's grounding us to the ground? What's going to anchor us to the ground and bring us back together as a crew? And we used to say, place the blade smooth, connected, and drive down low. And that was what we had as our anchor. That was our go-to call. And so in the preparation and in the lead up to our final, in our practice rows, we would just be thinking about our anchor. What is our role to produce our anchor every single stroke? So for me was stay tall, row the length that Lukey needs to row the boat in the stroke seat nice and long, and stay really smooth off the catch. And that was what I was thinking about to I guess, be keyed onto our anchor. And so ultimately it comes back to that idea of keeping it simple, and what is your role within that process. And so I'm sitting on the start line, the 2-minute call comes out, they call the crews, and then there's a tension, and then the green light goes, and I'm just there in my head, eyes on Lukey, just thinking, squeeze the first stroke, place the second, place the third. That boat's going to come up to speed, and we know that we're just going to be placing that blade smooth and connected, and it's going to produce speed. And ultimately, that's what we changed from the heat to the final, was our ability to hone in and absolutely trust what we have done in training. Because I guess any high performance or any big key game or moment, people talk about you're going to do something magic and you're going to create something that you never had before. Yes, those things do happen. And yes, there is those moments in Olympic history that do happen. But ultimately, the true champions don't rise to the occasion. They fall back to their training. And that's the process. You trust your process, because on the start line, you can't be thinking, I'm going to do something that I never have done before. You'll go backwards. You'll come last. It's that trust in what you've done day in, day out, and how you've gone about that, and how you've created it as your crew or as your team. And that doesn't have to just be me sitting on the start line in rowing. These skills that I've learned, I see as being quite transferable across into business, across into teaching, across into your young audience's studies. What is that sort of consistency? What is that process that I'm following? What am I anchoring myself to? What am I going to ground myself to when I feel like I'm getting stressed, or I feel like I'm getting taken away from what I'm prioritizing? So there's some things there to reflect on a bit.
Oh, for sure. Wow, there's a lot to reflect on there, but I just kind of want to go back a little bit as well, leading into Tokyo. And first thing that kind of comes to mind is after 2016, NTC becomes centralized. So all the heavyweight male athletes are training together. And obviously throughout your span of coaching, rowing in general, you have Tim McLaren, John Dryden, Ian Wright, and wherever you've kind of gone, there's always been that high performance culture, whether it's school or the NTC. So when you look at all the situations that you've been in, and then you performed excellently in all of them, is there kind of a few things that stand out in that high performance culture that brings everything together, and makes that unison that you were talking about before?
Yeah, so a really good sort of topic and focus there about high performance and high performing teams. Look, ultimately, for me, and reflecting sort of what I think is a high performing team, is trust. Is trust in those that are around you, and to have trust, and you need to have a level of empathy. So trusting your teammates, but that empathy to sort of be supportive of what each individual brings to your team or your organization. And to have that level of sort of trust and empathy, you need to be a little bit vulnerable. And what I mean by that is you need to sort of be brave enough to connect with people, not just from a working hard on the water type thing from a rowing sense. It's that getting to know that person, really valuing that person for who they are, And ultimately then what does that connection for us look like in our organization? So I think for us in high performance sport and in the center, trust is one thing that I think we always need to have. And I think in high performance sport or in high performing teams, that trust in those that are around you, that trust in your colleagues, and that trust that they will do the job. And the art of how do you get that? Well, that's the challenge, right? Like, how do we form that trust? How do we form that respect for each other? How do we have that level of empathy in our teams? But I think trust and respect are two big things in high performing teams. And I think if you can get those two parts right, you'll be successful, or you'll be on your way to team success. Because rowing, it's the ultimate team sport, right? I touched on it at the start, but I think one of the things that we did well in our crew, and sort of being a high performing crew, we had that trust and we had that respect for each other, and we had that sort of that real like embracing what each person brought to the crew and their background, or what are their strengths, or what are their areas of opportunity, and how do we embrace that? How do we work with? How do we tap into that? How do we bring out the best in them? So that idea of what do I need to do to make you look better type approach.
And I think that's something that we don't really talk about enough. It's so easy to be selfish nowadays, and especially in a sport like rowing, in smaller boats, where another question, I guess, that flows on from this, where ultimately at the NTC, you're competing against your best mates for a spot for essentially everyone's dream, which is in a certain boat or rowing for Australia internationally. And I remember clearly, this was maybe 2018, 2019. I was training one session and the NTC was down on the Nepean River, and I was head down, quiet, and I think there was a 5K going on that day, and it was just so tense. And usually whenever I saw you, it was like, "Oh, Julia, how you doing, Mr. Girdlestrone? It's good to see you." But today it was just, "Mr. Girdlestrone, hi Julia," and then head down and walk off. And I was like, "Oh, okay, it must be one of those days." And I go to the bathroom, and then progressively one athlete comes in after another. One throw, and a few of them just throw up, just one after the other. People come in and they're throwing up. So I guess there's two parts to this question. Obviously, cautious of time as well. What's that dynamic like, especially at a high level when you're competing for a spot at the Olympics? What's it like when you're competing with your best mates? And also, when it does come to those time trials, 2K ergs, where you really have to be at your best as often as you can, how do you put yourself in that mindset to perform and really showcase your skill set and what you've been training for this whole time?
Yeah, I guess sort of that you sort of touch on that dynamics of sort of that daily environment. We're picked as a squad here as the NTC, both the men and the women. There's 25 people in the squad, and you are right, like that daily competitive nature of being against your mates, versing your mates, which ultimately come March, you then are in an Australian boat together, and then come an Olympic year, we form that crew and we go on to take on the world. I think sort of the big thing that and the advantage that have of centralized system and that daily training environment, that it is super competitive on the water. And I think having that level of competition and that sort of side-by-side action and really wanting to be in front or produce a time or get a PB on the ergo or beat your mate next to you, I think that's really healthy. But I also believe in giving athletes the skills and the level of skills to how to manage that environment, which ultimately is heading in the direction of being together as a crew versus the world. It's not just about beating each other at the center and then falling at the line at a world championships, or being in a crew with your mates, but then there's conflict resolution and we don't have the skills to be able to overcome that, and we don't get a performance together at the world championships because we didn't address it from an early on stage. So I guess it's really competitive. It's a great environment for that, and to breed that hard race into, so that when you get on a start line, the guys in your boat have that competitive nature because you've harnessed it all together in the center. But I think there's the opportunity from that side of it is developing the skills to work with each other we go into the doubles with each other. You and I would have to figure out, okay, I need to do this, you need to do that, we need to go fast. We might not be absolute best buddies, but we're crewmates, and let's find that common goal together and let's work at it together. I want to do what I need to do to make you look good, and you need to do what you need to do to make me look good. Ultimately, if we can get that and figure that out, we'll go fast. But if we have that little simmering away sort of tension, or like we're just sort of covering it up in a time of pressure, that's going to crack and we will not go fast, and we probably won't be brave enough or be bold enough to say, yep, I didn't do that, or I didn't address this, or we wouldn't come at it the right way. Do you get what I mean there? And so I guess if you then, from an individual perspective, there's 2K ergos, there's 2K racing, there's 5K racing, there's 5K ergos, there's 30-minute rate 20s. There's a lot of individual testing that goes on. That's where you take control for yourself and really need to tap into your own skills there. And that ultimately those skills that you learn as an individual will benefit and maximize those around you. And people around you will build trust and respect for what you can do. And if you are consistent with those approaches and consistent with your way that you row the boat, or you're consistent with your approach to training or racing, people will want you in their crew. People will want to row with you. Ultimately, you want people to want to be rowing with you because of what you do in racing, how you train, how you are as a friend, how you are as a competitor, a teammate, a crewmate, how you respect them, you look after them, you look out for them. All those little things, we're human, right? Like, people pick up on those things. And if you can just develop those little skills, people will want to row with you. And that is like in business. People want to be on a team in a business with you because you get the most out of them, or you know them as a person, or you respect them, or you've given them opportunities, or you really listen to them. You're there when they need you. That's, I think, what sort of creates the real ultimate team player.
Gold. And I could ask questions for the rest of the afternoon, but just one final one, because I know we've both got to go separate ways. Back when you were in university, if you could go back to that time, that age, roughly 21, 22, 20, what advice would you give yourself that you've kind of found now that you think was applicable to you back then? Because we've talked about a lot. That's definitely useful for me. I'm going to take a lot of this conversation, and I hope the audience does too. But for you, going back to 20 to 22, what advice would you give yourself?
Yeah, I guess probably my biggest piece of advice, and it sort of comes back to that first point that I touched on around sort of help in your support networks. Create a support network around you, and find someone who you can act as your mentor or two mentors. Mainly, I sort of probably just say one mentor, someone who really knows you. It might be a family member, it may not be, it might be a coach, it might be a best mate, but find a mentor that someone can really guide you, help you. When you've got those tough times, you can talk through them. Someone that might be in the field of what you're interested in, it might not be. But if it is a business thing, search and maybe connect with someone and create that support network around you. Because ultimately for me, absolutely at that time when I sort of wasn't going very well in sort of 2007, 2008, of course my family and my loved ones and all my mates were there for me. But I guess I wasn't brave enough to find that person who knew me and knew what I was going through. I guess I probably canvassed it a little bit and sort of put it under the rug a little bit, whereas I probably needed to be brave enough to bring it forward. And if you've got that close person, or if you've got that mentor, they really know you, and they can get the most out of you, and they can help you, guide you through difficult times. It might be university, it might be relations, it might be business, it might be work, but you've got that avenue and that opportunity to tap into and have that connection with someone who might just one day be really there for you when you need it. So that would be my sort of reflection for my 22-year-old self, would be find that, really set that support network up around you. Keep it simple. In life, you're 22, you're in a prime of your life, you're university, you're working, you're with your mates. Keep it simple and enjoy yourself. It's not like one or else. You've got to have that perspective.
I really think people are going to take a lot from this conversation. Thank you so much for your time, Cam. I really always enjoy talking to you, whether through text or whatever it is. All the best with the kid. Say hello to the wife, and all the
I
best.
will.
We'll stay
Maybe
in
we
touch.
maybe KalantarKast we can do a take 2, or we can do volume 2 or something like that. Hey, we can keep tapping into a few of these things.
There's nothing I'd like more, to be honest. Nothing I'd
All
like
right.
more. Perfect.
Yeah.
We'll
All
talk
right, mate.
soon. Thanks so
Talk
much.
soon,
Have a
mate.
good one. Bye bye.
All right. See you, mate.